Is society collapsing before our very eyes? Well, there's certainly some indicators that would suggest we're not doing too well. Stick around to find out what they are. All right, so today we're going to cover a lot of ground here. We're going to talk a little bit about Biden and some of his gaffes at the NAACP convention. We're going to talk about Jack Black and his bandmate Kyle Glass and some of the comments that they've made about the Trump assassination, as well as others and what they're saying about it. We're going to talk about Ingrid Andress and her Star Strangled Banner performance, and why she basically botched the song. We're going to talk more about Thomas Matthew Crooks. We're going to look at some fake news surrounding him, some fake news, at least in my estimation, as well as some authentic news about him and how he was able to do what he did, some things that led up to the assassination attempt. We're going to take a look at Vivek's powerful message at the RNC, as well as the YouTuber Destiny's downfall due to some of his comments that he recently made about the assassination attempt, and a couple other things. Briefly take a look at Amber Rose, who spoke at the RNC, and some other things that she has said that people need to be aware of. And lastly, I want to take a brief look at a Latin Mass letter that a group of Catholics and a few bishops have signed, asking the Holy Father, Pope Francis, to continue access to the Missal of 1962. So a lot in store today. So let's first maybe just start out with, some of the comments made by Biden yesterday in the NAACP, at the NAACP convention. All right, let's begin here. You should be able to see the video right around now. Let's watch it together.
I know you say, Joe, you may not have a Congress. Well, guess what? You all told me I couldn't pass the Inflation Reduction Act. You all told me I couldn't face it. Anyway, we did it. We're going to bring rents down, as I said. We're going to build 2 million affordable homes. And cap rent increases of 5% a year so corporate landlords can't. God. Anyway, I don't want to get going. I'm going to get very upset. But there's gouging America. And by the way, not only saves lives, it will save taxpayers. Just what I did on the first round on dealing with Medicare. It saves the taxpayer $160 billion because they don't have to pay these exorbitant prices to these anyway.
All right, look, I'm noticing a pattern here. Whenever it seems that Biden kind of loses his train of thought, he just says anyway and just stops and moves on to something else. But it's unfortunate because it's like he can't get through a sentence without some kind of blunder. He can't finish a thought. And so, again, if we're having these kinds of difficulties now, what is he going to be like for the next 4 years if he's elected? I mean, think about him 4 years ago. He was a lot better 4 years ago, and look at how his cognitive abilities have declined in the last 4 years. Can you imagine another 4 years of this? This is just an absolute joke. And I also have to say, I can't understand what he's saying. He's just not an effective communicator. And listen, I'm from Louisiana. We have a lot of people who, well, we're going to go over there, get some barbecue, eat some chicken biscuits over there. And they talk really, in some ways that are kind of hard to understand. And I can understand them, but I can't understand Biden. I mean, so if I, who am kind of used to, picking up on what people are saying, even though they may speak in a very difficult way to understand, if I can, understand them, but I can't understand Biden, I just imagine that a lot of other people also probably can't make a whole lot out of what he is saying. And so part of being a president, among many other things, is being an effective communicator. And this is just not it. And so John L says, rare look at Michael's real voice. I love Michael's Louisiana accent. Well, and there's different ones in Louisiana too, right? So this one is more your northeastern Louisiana accent, certainly different than what you'll hear in New Orleans. Okay, so look, this is an epic meltdown at this point, and I don't think we can do another 4 years of this. Now, let's take a look at some of the other comments he also made here. Let's go to this one. Comments about children as victims of gun violence. Again, at the same NAACP convention. Here we go.
If we're going to speak about violence, we're going to speak about guns. More children in America die of a gunshot wound than any other reason. That's stunning and that is sick. If we're going to speak about violence.
Watch it again.
We're going to speak about guns. More children in America die of a gunshot wound than any other reason. That's stunning and that is sick.
Why the shift in tone suddenly like that? But okay, more importantly, yeah, I mean, children dying as victims of gun violence is horrible. I guess one of my questions, however, is he's calling attention to the gravity of this situation. Meanwhile, he doesn't call attention to his own policies on the murder of numerous innocent infants in abortion. So if we're going to talk about children as victims of violence, sure, we can obviously have this discussion. But if you're going to get really passionate about this subject, why aren't you even more passionate about the millions of infants who die and are murdered in the womb because of policies that Biden supports? To me, it just seems hypocritical to even talk about this in light of that, at least for him to talk about it in light of his policies. And so I was just left scratching my head at that point with that comment. Now, another one that really left me scratching my head was this one, especially towards the end where he offers some thoughts about peaceful protests over George Floyd. Peaceful protests. I don't know if y'all were following the news at the time, but if you were, and you were on social media at the time watching the numerous videos surrounding the story, I don't know how we can speak of peaceful protests. But let's watch the comments.
Now, just because we must lower the temperature in our politics and relate to violence, it doesn't mean we should stop telling the truth. Who you are, what you've done, what you'll do, that's fair game. As Harry Truman said, I've never given anyone hell. I just told the truth and they thought it was hell. That's what I'm going to do. Well, here's the truth about why Donald Trump's presidency was hell for Black Americans. He tried to repeal Obamacare to kick millions of Black Americans off their health insurance. He had a $2 trillion tax cut that overwhelmingly benefited the super wealthy, the biggest corporation, and exploded the federal debt larger than any one president has in one term. He left no room for us to do what we should be doing. Invest in things that affect people's lives, like child care, elder care, and so much more that grow the economy and help people. His mismanagement of the pandemic was especially devastating to Black communities. Oh, I know, because in other countries, other communities of color. That economic crisis drove up Black unemployment, decimated small Black businesses, and you peacefully protested George Floyd's murder. Donald Trump called for the National Guard to go after you. What in the hell's the matter with this man? Well, I'm serious. Go figure. From a guy who spread the birtherism lie against Barack Obama, saying he wasn't born in America and he wasn't a U.S. citizen.
Okay, so it was a little hard to understand that. But again, this is brought to you by the same guy who also told a Black audience that if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. What is this? Is it pandering? Because it doesn't seem to be in accord with reality. Peaceful protests surrounding George Floyd? What planet is he living on? Maybe there was like a few peaceful protests that happened in the shadow of like a million others that weren't peaceful. What is going on here? So, as you can clearly see, the speech at the NAACP was a train wreck. Now, here's kind of a growing trend that I've been noticing with a number of individuals. This comes from Kyle Gass, the one of the band members of Tenacious D, a band member along with Jack Black at a concert recently. I believe it was in Australia. And they bring out a birthday cake to him because evidently it's his birthday, and they ask him for a birthday wish. And he wishes that, next time somebody makes an attempt on Trump's life, don't miss. And everybody laughs and cheers it on. And I'm just wondering, okay, how does this work? If we now think it's okay to call for the assassination of one politician, does he not realize that that's then going to give other people license to call for the attempt of the assassination of other politicians, perhaps ones that he endorses? No, it's horrible. I don't support that at all. I think this is wrong to call for the assassination of anybody. But if one side is going to call for that assassination and say, hey, don't miss next time. Okay, well, you're also giving license to people on the other end to say the same thing about your favorite candidate. And perhaps somebody will be stupid enough to actually go and do it. And so, in other words, this just incites more hatred and more violence. So watch this brief clip here of what he says.
Don't miss Trump next time.
Now, he says, don't miss Trump next time, the guy over here. You can see Jack Black over here, very conspicuous because he's wearing the same clothes that he's been wearing for about 3 months. So that's clearly Jack Black. And then his bandmate, Kyle Gass. And it doesn't appear that Jack Black has a real problem with this. Although, oddly enough, after this, he comes out with a public statement indicating that, he doesn't agree with this. He was blindsided. And, future, the rest of the tour, effectively in the future, has been canceled. Maybe it's because he really didn't agree with this, or it's because Australia seems to be moving for a motion, have them deported, it would seem. I don't know exactly what the intention and motives behind the mea culpa here really are, but I didn't see a whole lot of protest right here live. I mean, watch it again. Here again, Jack Black is over here on the right.
Happy birthday, make a wish, Canada. Don't miss Trump next time. Thank you.
I didn't really see any protests, but this is disgusting behavior. You may not like Trump, but this is absolutely disgusting. And I think it would be just as disgusting if somebody said that about a different politician. I think this is absolutely reprehensible. But for some reason, people think that this is perfectly fine. We're seeing this a lot. We're seeing people on social media constantly saying, aim better, don't miss next time, and stuff like that. Here's an employee of Home Depot being confronted at her job for things that she said on Facebook. Now, whether or not she should be confronted at her job for comments that she made on Facebook is a different question, but here is where that's happening.
Are you Darcy Waldron?
I was Waldron, yeah.
Okay, from Cayuga. And you think that the shooter should have been a better shot? Is that what you posted on Facebook?
I am at work.
You think that the shooter should have been a shooter, huh?
I am at work.
Yeah, I think that's pretty messed up. Pretty anti-American, if you ask me. As a veteran, I'm disgusted. What have you provided to this country? Huh? I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. You are ridiculous. And I'm making you famous. Are you?
Now, whether or not she should be confronted at her job is a different question. Being confronted at your job certainly is not as bad as calling for the murder of somebody in public. So I would certainly say the gravity of the situation is more with her than anybody else and how they confronted her. But it also does bring up the issue that, social media is, and what you say on social media can certainly be brought into the workplace and you can be confronted for it. So it's certainly something that people should keep in mind. We're also seeing this from another angle here with the YouTuber Destiny. So he is pretty controversial for a number of reasons, but he came out and recently said something that I didn't expect him to say. There's a ton of things that I think he's wrong about, but I didn't think he would ever go to this level. Let me share my screen and show it to you. This is an edited version. That way we're not showing profanity here. Okay.
It, the dude, the firefighter guy, Trump, people that support him. I just want you to know, okay, just in case you're confused or it seems like I'm, whatever. If one of you were in the crowd and you're a conservative fan of mine and you end up, getting blown away or whatever I'm making fun of you the next day on Twitter. I am 100%.
Wow. That is pretty terrible. So what he's saying, just for context for anybody who may not be certain what he's saying there, the man who was murdered because of the assassination attempt, the heroic man who was protecting his family, that guy, he says, yeah, I'm making fun of him. I'm making fun of him on my show. Just because he's there, worthy to be made fun of. But then, oddly enough, he wants to call people to a higher standard. He wants to call Republicans to a higher standard when his morals are in the gutter. And not just here, but elsewhere in his life. So I was shocked by that. I couldn't believe it. I understand he's been demonetized on Twitter for that. A lot of people are very upset with what he has said. And then I watched this video and was further horrified by him quadrupling down on the issue. And Piers Morgan rightly rebukes him and puts him in his place, shows how despicable he is, and then how he's being incredibly hypocritical in some ways. And I highly encourage everybody to go and watch that show. It was, I believe, yesterday, Inhuman, Piers Morgan versus Destiny on Trump shooting, 19 hours ago. Go and watch it. It's very eye-opening. And he's constantly confronted with the fact that that kind of rhetoric and those kinds of comments are horrible. And he just would not budge on it. He kept deflecting and just saying, well, people on the other end of the spectrum say nasty things. Well, obviously, two wrongs don't make a right. And so if you want to call out other people for being nasty in their behavior, you can't go and be nasty back. You have to be a step higher. And so if you're going to call them to a higher standard, you have to live that. You can't be a hypocrite while calling someone else to a higher standard that you don't live up to. So this would have been a perfect opportunity for him to say, look, on further reflection, that was really wrong of me. I apologize. No, he wouldn't do it. Is this the downfall of Destiny? I suspect it is. But we're seeing this very common these days, and it's really unfortunate. Now let's shift over to a couple other things here. First of all, we got Ingrid Andress, who is a famous speaker. To be honest, I don't know. Not speaker, singer. I don't really know anything about her because I don't pay attention to this genre of music. Evidently, she's a country singer. But she sings the Star Spangled Banner at this Arlington Stadium, the home run stadium, I believe. And it's pretty interesting. And then after that, we're going to see what her explanation for it was.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed by the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
This guy's laughing.
And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Right. Yeah. Now, I agree with Indiana. I kind of imagine purgatory is like this. Yes. Or listening to country music at all. Sorry to all the country fans out there. But yes, it does something to my soul that is very painful listening to it. It hurts me. It pains me. It's like Norman Finkelstein in his debate with Destiny when he called him a moronic fool, I think. You're such a profound moronic fool. It pains me to listen to you. It pains me in my soul. That's kind of how I feel when I listen to any of it. But, to each their own. Now, somebody said, no, nothing beats the Fergie song at the NBA. I don't know. I think this one takes the cake. But more importantly than her performance, because hey, she admittedly does better than I do when it comes to singing. Even this performance it's better than what I would have done. But she gives us an explanation for why this happened, and again, it's another example of how society is collapsing. She says, "I was drunk." She apologizes for worst national anthem rendition, and she's going to rehab. Okay. First of all, how did this happen, right? There's no fail-safe here. There's no standards. You just allow a drunk person to stumble in and sing. There's no standards. Nobody noticed. Maybe she's drunk. Maybe she shouldn't go out. Maybe we can do something else. Like, nobody notices. Why is this stuff normalized? Why are we allowing this kind of stuff in society? I was just amazed by this. Now, admittedly, we allow for way worse things than this, but it just kind of goes to show how some of this stuff is really becoming normalized. I mean, again, there has to be a ton of people surrounding her that failed her to allow this to happen. Like, nobody confronted her, no family members, no friends, and say, hey, don't go out there. Don't do this. You're drunk. Nobody did that. The people who are responsible for the singing of the national anthem at the stadium didn't pull her to the side and say, hey, we're going to have to yank you. This is unprofessional. Anything goes today in a clown world. Now, I want to briefly talk about this. I came across this Thomas Crooks Steam account located. I don't even know what a Steam account is. I've never heard of Steam, but I can tell you this, that ain't his account. How do I know that? Well, just look at it. Here's what they show us. A Steam account, Thomas M. Crooks, Pennsylvania, United States. And whose photo is on there? Is that Thomas Matthew Crooks? Now, if y'all watched the video that I did just a few days ago about who is Thomas Matthew Crooks, what we know about the shooter, if you watch that, you know that's not Thomas Matthew Crooks. That is Matthew Urick. That's a picture of a different guy. It's an alternative theory to who the shooter actually was. The FBI has identified Thomas Matthew Crooks as the shooter, but others have come along and said, no, I actually think it's this other guy, Matthew Urick. That's Matthew Urick, not Thomas M. Crooks. So it seems to me like somebody just created a fake Steam account and put that guy's photo in there. So this does not appear to be authentic. So is this more fake news surrounding the shooter? Possibly, but it raises a deeper question than just fake news surrounding the shooter. If we had more information about who the shooter was and their social media presence, you wouldn't have room for this kind of propaganda and fake news. Why don't we have more information about the shooter and his presence on social media? Some suggest some of that was scrubbed. I don't know. It's possible. It's also possible that's not the case. It's possible his social media footprint was relatively scrubbed after this incident for one reason or another, either because they don't want people seeing what he was saying and becoming convinced of his views, or because it would lead to other information that they don't want out there, or it could be that he just didn't have a large social media presence. Any of those are theoretically true, but considered in and of itself, I don't know. But then when you put it in further context of failure after failure after failure surrounding the situation with the shooter, you do have to start to ask questions like, what's going on here? Why are there so many failures? And why are there so many unresolved questions at this point? It does feel like information is deliberately being withheld. To what extent, by whom, what is its nature? Those are certainly different questions worth being explored. I think at this point it would be helpful if there is a thorough investigation on this situation. Don't know if that's going to happen. And I don't know if the investigation happens, if it would even be a fair investigation, or if it would also be problematic itself. So that kind of brings us to some information that we do know, however, about the shooter. A few updates here. FBI cracked Trump shooter's phone with tech from Israel's Celebrite report. Took them about 40 hours. Usually it takes a few months to crack a phone, they say, but they cracked it in about 40 hours, and they weren't, according to them, they weren't able to really find any kind of information that sheds light on the motives. They say that they have a few leads from it, but not a whole lot to go off of. But they did find another cell phone in his house that was uncharged, and perhaps there's some information there. So they're looking into that, although it's not unusual to have many cell phones, because I think we all know what happens is whenever our cell phone is out of date, it's outdated. You go and get a new phone and you throw that old one in one of your, desk drawers or something. Perhaps that's what's going on here, or it is just a second cell phone that has some information on it. We'll see. But I do think that is noteworthy. They're claiming they didn't find a whole lot in regards to motives. They did find a message where he was indicating to his employer that he needs to take off for this day, but that's about all they have said so far. They did find out basically what his itinerary was prior to the shooting. They kind of retraced his steps. He went on Friday to his sportsman's club and used the rifle range there. I mean, for obvious reasons, right? Also purchased a ladder from Home Depot. And some people have pointed out, well, he was carrying this ladder for quite some time to get on top of that building. By the way, on the inside of the building are snipers, not on top of it, but on the inside. And nobody really noticed this. It's just not adding up. I mean, somebody's carrying around a ladder, putting it on top of a building, going up there. Now, I know that some people notice at some point, maybe about 3 minutes before the assassination attempt, but wouldn't you notice him hours before? I did see the authorities say that they noticed that he was a man of suspicion, a person of suspicion, perhaps an hour or so before the shooting, but they couldn't find him after a certain period of time. And the next time they saw him was when he was taking the shots. And so there's a massive failure here. And it really is just hard to believe that it's due to incompetence. It may be that. It certainly may be, but it could be more than that. And that's why I think there needs to be an investigation, because it seems like there's just too many failures that took place all at once for this to happen. So I hope we end up finding out more, and people who are responsible for this are held accountable, because again, a person lost their life. Multiple others were injured, and the president was not only injured, but his life was almost taken because of this. And it was by just luck, providence, grace, that he didn't get murdered right there on television before everyone. He turned his head just very briefly at the last moment, which effectively saved his life. In fact, they have a nice way to illustrate this in this video right here. Benny Johnson shares this video, and you can kind of see it. Let me zoom.
Take a look what happened.
See how he tilts his head, and it goes right by, raises his ear. See here, if he had not tilted, it would have gone through here. It would have gone right through his brain.
Take a look what
So right now he's in the kill zone, barely moves, ear is grazed. That's pretty incredible to think that if he had not just moved his head half a second earlier, he would be dead. That's pretty wild. Now, some people have contested the question that this is God's providence in the matter. Well, look, God is sovereign over everything, right? So if something bad happens, God has permitted it for a greater good, but he doesn't directly act on people so that an evil is accomplished. God doesn't commit evil. But some people are concerned even about appealing to God's grace and saving Trump's life, because they're like, hey, God didn't save this other guy. And so I understand how that could be considered an expression that's insensitive to the other man who did lose his life. But I don't think theologically it's wrong to point out that God in his grace spared a person. In reality, God in his grace spares some lives and not others. And ultimately, the infinite wisdom of God discerns why that is, and we don't know why it is, but we know it's for a greater good. Sometimes it's hard for us to wrestle with that, especially when we personally experience tragedy in our own lives. Anybody who's ever been through suffering knows that. It's a tough pill to swallow. Nonetheless, it's still true. So while it could come across as insensitive, I understand what people are saying when they say that it's by God's grace that Trump's life was saved there. Now, I want to take a look briefly here at Vivek Ramaswamy's, a clip of his speech at the RNC. And, you know, some people have watched this clip and the rest of his speech, and they felt like maybe he would have been an even better choice for vice president. Why wasn't he made vice president? I can certainly understand that question when you watch how good of a speaker he is here. Watch this.
To those of you watching this at home tonight, I'd like to deliver a message that the media doesn't want you to hear from the Republican Party. Our message to Black Americans is this: the media has tried to convince you for decades that Republicans don't care about your communities, but we do. We want for you what we want for every American: safe neighborhoods, clean streets, good jobs, a better life for your children, and a justice system that treats everyone equally, regardless of your skin color and regardless of your political beliefs. Our message to every legal immigrant in this country is this: you're like my parents. You deserve the opportunity to secure a better life for your children in America. But our message to illegal immigrants is also this: we will return you to your country of origin, not because you're all bad people, but because you broke the law.
Well, I would point out that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, and isn't necessarily the best move. Maybe in some cases they do need to be returned, but there could be some people who broke the law but actually would be very beneficial to this society. So maybe it would be important to look a little bit more into it instead of just jumping the gun and saying, no, you immediately got to go. Actually, some people could very well contribute to society, even if they started out on the wrong foot. So I think we need to put a little bit more scrutiny into that. But okay, let's move forward.
And the United States of America was founded on the rule of law. Our message to millennials, speaking as one myself: yes, it's true. Our government sold us a false bill of goods with the Iraq War and the 2008 financial crisis, loading up our national debt that falls on our generation's shoulders, telling us that if we took out college loans, we'd somehow get a head start on the American dream, when it hasn't worked out that way. But we can't just be cynical about our country, because the United States of America is still the last best hope that we have, and we deserve a better class of politician, one who actually tells us the truth, even if it comes with some mean tweets from time to time. And our message to Gen Z is this: you're going to be the generation that actually saves this country. You want to be a rebel? You want to be a hippie? You want to stick it to the man? Show up on your college campus and try calling yourself a conservative. Say you want to get married, have kids, teach them to believe in God and pledge allegiance to their country. Because you know what? Fear has been infectious in this country, but courage can be contagious too. That too is what it means to be an American.
All right, so some good points. I mean, hey, there's some points that could be contested, and he's not always right on everything, but there's some good points made there, and clearly a very effective speaker. I mean, an infinite amount of times better than what we see with Biden. So perhaps he could have been selected as VP. I don't know. Some people are throwing that out there. Certainly an effective speaker, though. I want to talk briefly about Amber Rose. This is a short that I put together because I think some people might be unaware of some of the positions that she holds, or at least at one point held to. I haven't seen a retraction of these things yet. If they're out there, let me know. But certainly some disturbing things. Amber Rose is a rapper. Evidently, I've never heard of her until she appeared at the RNC. But evidently, she's a rapper and was in a relationship with Kanye West at some point or something like that. Who knows? Well, she was invited to the RNC to talk about how she used to be against Republicans, but now she's a Republican herself. And, well, okay. I don't know if this is the best speaker, however, because to my knowledge, stuff like this has not been repudiated. Let's watch this.
They're atheists as well, but they're just more political. Satanists are just, they're atheists as well, but they're just more political.
Okay.
They have like it's actually a very rational, logical religion. They help a lot of people, a lot of women to get abortions in southern states that, you know, where they're illegal. They help a lot of the gay community, the LGBTQ plus community. They're really great with that.
Now, is this really what we want representing the RNC? That's pretty rough. That's really rough stuff there. Hopefully she no longer feels that way, and will repudiate those views. But as of right now, to my knowledge, she hasn't done that. What kind of message are we sending to people by having her speak at the RNC? Now, some people will say, well, hey, everybody's kind of a work in progress. Sure, but when you're a work in progress at that level, and it's still in progress, and by the way, we're assuming it's a work in progress, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should have a voice on a certain platform. There are some people who are a work in progress right now, but they're in a state that they would not represent society very well if you gave them a certain platform. So while I want to say, of course, we need to extend grace to people, that doesn't necessarily mean that we extend platforms to them. Jesus ate with sinners. Yes. He also didn't put those people who were in progress with their sinning positions. He didn't put them in positions of leadership. He didn't make them apostles. You have some apostles who had previously sinned, but their life was changed. If a person hasn't yet changed their life, that's a different issue. And you can't appeal to, well, Jesus ate with sinners. And eating with sinners is not the same as giving them a position of leadership or appealing to them as an authority in really any area that's related to the question of faith and morals. So I think this was a really, really bad look, a really bad move, and it certainly leads to a lot of troubling questions about the state of the RNC right now. Let's take a brief look, however, shifting gears at one other thing. I'll share my screen so you can see it. This is an article by CNA. Letter from the Americas urges Pope Francis to stop the Latin Mass bans. Now, I've done a lot of videos on where we're at with this, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So y'all can certainly go and watch those. I could put a link to them in the show notes. But there's a letter signed by a group of people, including a couple bishops, including Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco, supporting the letter and asking Pope Francis not to further restrict the Missal of 1962. And what we appear to see is what may happen is there could be further restrictions to the Missal of 62 in diocesan parishes at the parish life, and but not for institutes that were created specifically to have a charism of perpetuating this liturgy. Pope Francis seems to be on board with perpetuating that liturgy within those institutes. But it does appear that he could be open to further restricting the Missal of 62 in a diocesan context. And one of the reasons is, as great of a liturgy as it is, and as beautiful as it is, some people have weaponized it and used it as a point of contention to look down on other liturgies in the Roman Rite that are not the Missal of 62. And they have been weaponized in numerous ways that I've expressed on this show, and Pope Francis has expressed concerns there. Many bishops have also expressed their concerns there. Whenever Pope Francis restricted it initially with Traditionis Custodes a few years back, instead of proving Pope Francis wrong, many people, not all in this community, there's really great people in this community who don't weaponize it, but many people in the community did continue to weaponize it and went even further, saying that, you know, the Pope doesn't have this authority, and if he attempts to do this, we're going to ignore him, and we're going to, and even allowing for illicit ordinations to take place at various parishes, because they believe that it's absolutely essential to ordain people under the older form rather than the newer form. And so they ended up proving Pope Francis right instead of wrong. Again, not everybody, but a large and significant amount of people, especially the ones who are most vocal about it. So I could see further restrictions. Now, I think it's nice that some archbishops want to ask Pope Francis, well, maybe this isn't the best approach. Okay, fair enough. But I have to ask, where are those same archbishops and bishops calling on laity to stop weaponizing that liturgy so that this doesn't happen? The appeal shouldn't be first and foremost to Pope Francis. What you should see is archbishops and bishops appealing to the laity saying, hey, stop doing this. And the reality is a lot of the bishops have been asleep at the wheel, not addressing this issue with people in their own territory, and with numerous content creators on YouTube who push for schismatic agendas, dissenting agendas, weaponization of the Missal of 62. I want to say, why is it that these archbishops and bishops are quick to step up and speak up on this issue with Pope Francis and their superior, but they can't address their inferiors? And they can't address the root of the problem. The root of the problem isn't Pope Francis. Pope Francis is responding to the root of the problem. Maybe in not the best way, you can argue that, but he's responding to something. The root problem is not him here. The root problem is people weaponizing this liturgy. And what we should be seeing is more bishops rebuking that mentality and that agenda. Unfortunately, it's like crickets. You don't hear from them. Silence. Instead, what you do see is them throwing in their support to, let's keep it going. It's a beautiful liturgy. I agree. I do support that. I do think it's a beautiful liturgy. I do think that all things being equal, it needs to be perpetuated. I do think that there is an evangelistic nature to beauty. So I agree with all that. But I just want to say, if that's all you're saying and you're not addressing and rebuking the people who are the root cause of the problem, who are weaponizing the mass and leading souls astray, then you're missing the real root cause here. And we're failing to do what we're supposed to do. So I want to say, take all that energy that you have in defending this to Pope Francis, take that energy and first start by rebuking laity and content creators who are creating chaos in the Catholic Church right now. That would be helpful. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed this show. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Got another show coming up here in just a little bit with Louis Dizon, where we're going to be talking about the biblical and historical case for the Catholic doctrine of baptismal regeneration. So stay tuned for more on that, especially if you're a Protestant, you'll enjoy it, but also if you're a Catholic. We'll see you later.